Let's make some cookies that don't suck for some holiday cookie boxes. Normally, I try to make cozy fantasy food videos, so if that's something you would enjoy, make sure to subscribe. But today, I wanted to show everyone some basics of cookie making and show an economical way to show some love to people this season. We are making a few different types of cookies here, and I've ranked them from easiest to make to hardest to make. But essentially, we're using 3.5 different methods on 5 different cookies to achieve a chewy texture with some delicious flavor. Let's start with the basics though. For these almondy sugar cookies, we are going to begin by preheating the oven to 350 degrees and by using the paddle attachment to cream 1 cup of butter in the stand mixer or a bowl with an electric mixer, slowly adding in 1¼ cups of sugar until it looks nice and fluffy. Then we are adding in 1 egg, mixing until incorporated, then adding in our flavorings like 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract and ½ teaspoon of almond extract. The great thing about this recipe in particular is that you can experiment around a little bit. Try these with some peppermint extract, maple extract, whatever your heart desires. Then we need to add in our dry ingredients to the mixer here. We're adding in 2½ cups of flour, a ½ teaspoon of baking soda, a ½ teaspoon of baking powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're just mixing these until they come together. You don't want to mix these and develop a bunch of gluten. After this, we're just going to use a small cookie scoop to portion them, then roll them in granulated sugar. We don't need to chill these since they're high in flour and butter, but basically every other recipe will need to be chilled. We're using parchment paper on these trays, spacing them out nicely, then pushing down the tops of them just to give them a little bit more of a traditional shape when they bake. Feel free to use a fork or the fingies. We are baking them for 10 to 12 minutes, checking them occasionally. Now we want these to be chewy once they come out of the oven, which means that we need to make sure they're baked well. Try testing them by pushing on a corner of the cookies, and if they indent just around your finger, it means they need more time. But if you sort of push in a plate of the cookie, that means they're ready to finish baking on the tray and later transferred to a wire rack. These are a great basic cookie, but we're using them in this box as a sort of filler. So let's crank up the heat with some molasses cookies next. These are going to start off very similarly to the almond sugar cookies, but we're upping the flavor in these. This is also the only recipe that needs the oven at 375 degrees, so plan accordingly. We're creaming together a ½ cup of butter and 3/4 cups of brown sugar, as well as 5 tablespoons of molasses, before adding in 1 egg and stopping the mixer. Notice how I'm always starting with combining the sugar and the butter and then the egg and then the dry ingredients for these cookies. Essentially, every basic cookie is going to begin like this. We are then adding in 1½ cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, a ½ teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of clove, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're using a rubber spatula to combine all of this together, then transferring it to a plastic wrap, squishing it into a disc, and letting it chill in the fridge for about 30 minutes. Then we're using a cookie scoop again, rolling them in sugar. We're using this parchment paper because I'm lazy, eco-friendly. We're baking these at 375 degrees for 12 to 14 minutes, again utilizing the technique with the sugar cookies to see if a plate of the cookie moves after it's done baking. We're then letting these finish baking on the trays before transferring them to a wire rack. Some of mine got a little wonky because I didn't mix the butter and sugar well enough. Don't let it be you. Now, these are great cookies, but variety is the spice of life, so let's make some really good chocolate chip cookies. Yes, I know they're not super Christmassy, but they are my 3rd favorite cookie, so let's do it. For these cookies, we're measuring in grams and ounces because it allows you to use fewer dishes. To begin, we're combining 200 grams of brown sugar in a bowl with 113 grams of granulated sugar. Then adding in 113 grams of melted butter until well combined. Next, we're adding in 1 egg and 1 egg yolk, mixing them until well combined yet again. Then let's toss in 6 grams of vanilla extract and 3 grams of salt. After those are well combined, let's also add 200 grams of flour, 2 grams of espresso powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Once the flour is almost incorporated completely, we're also adding in 198 grams of the chocolate of our choice. I chose a 70% dark chocolate, but you need to live your own life. I'm then going to take a sheet of plastic wrap and place it over the top, letting it chill in the fridge for about an hour. To bake, we're reusing the parchment paper again, and instead of using a cookie scoop here, I'm actually going to weigh them into 2-ounce balls because they tend to be massively different in size if you don't weigh them. We're baking them for 12 minutes or until pushing in the side of the cookie results in pushing in a segment of the outside, then letting them finish on the tray before transferring to a wire rack. Now let a mistake of mine be a warning to you all. I was not aware that the bottom of my oven was much hotter than the top of my oven, which resulted in a tray of my cookies being overcooked on the bottom and undercooked on top, despite them being in the oven for less time than the other 2 trays. Either know your oven or put them in the middle. You've been warned. So let's spice it up a little bit and make cookies, but square. And in a pan. Gingerbread Blondies, let's go. To begin, we are combining 330 grams of brown sugar with 2 tablespoons of molasses, 1 tablespoon of grated ginger, and 1 cup of melted butter. Then whisk in 2 eggs before adding in 2 tablespoons of brandy or vanilla extract. Then toss in 225 grams of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 3/4 teaspoons of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. Then we're just grabbing a pan about this size, greasing it down, pouring it in, and baking it for anywhere from 18 to 25 minutes, or until a toothpick inserted in the middle comes out clean. Now, because I didn't use parchment paper in the bottom of this, I had to cut it in the pan, so if you would like to cut it very evenly, make sure to use some parchment in the bottom. However, I'm just slicing these after I let it partially cool in the pan and putting them in these paper bags to go on the bottom of the boxes. Finally, we are going to be making a cookie that is chewy due to being leavened with egg and uses very little flour. Now, I would like some candied ginger slices on top of these, so this step is very optional, and you can also just buy candied ginger. But I like it, so I'm peeling 450 grams of ginger, slicing it up, and putting it into a pot, covering it with water, and bringing it to a boil. I'm then going to let it boil for about 10 minutes. We're then going to drain it and repeat that process. Then we can add in the ginger with 4 cups of water and 4 cups of sugar, cooking that well past boiling and laying out the strips on a sheet tray to dry out a little after covering with sugar. I left these out overnight and then cut them into little strips, tossing them in sugar again, and just set them aside. To begin on the base of these cookies, we're going to melt 225 grams of chocolate together with 55 grams of butter. And to be honest, you can just do this in the microwave. Just do it 30 seconds at a time, mixing it in between each stint. In a separate bowl, whisk together 45 grams of flour, 30 grams of cocoa powder, 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and a half teaspoon of salt, and set that aside. Next, in another separate bowl, we're going to use the electric mixer to combine 100 grams of sugar, 55 grams of brown sugar, and 2 eggs until they're nice and fluffy. After this, we're going to grate in 1 tablespoon of ginger, as well as 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Then we're combining the melted chocolate and the dry ingredients in. Once this is incorporated, we can add in another 115 grams of chocolate chips. Now, this batter is very loose, so we have to use a cookie scoop again for it. All reliable at this point. I'm then going to decorate with the candied ginger slices. These won't spread too much, so we can put them relatively close together, but they can go straight into a 350-degree oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. This time, just gently pinching the sides of the cookies to see if the edges are firm. Now let's assemble those boxes. I have these China boxes that I bought from Target, very much not sponsored, and I can put a link in the description for these, or you can buy your own from a multitude of stores. Now I'm giving these to 4 of our new neighbors as a holiday gift, but I'm placing in the Gingerbread Blondies first since they're very flat, and trying just to give them a good sample of all the cookies. These are all so chewy and flavorful, and our neighbors were all very grateful to receive the boxes, and texted me later saying how much they loved the flavors. So if you want to spread the love, I highly recommend doing this or some version of it for this season of giving. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, let me know what you'd like me to do next in the comments below. I'll see you next time.